Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this first in our Hill Watch Live series, an exclusive series for subscribers designed to help you navigate today's complex policy environment. Today, we're focused on giving you an outlook on the year ahead with firsthand perspectives and actionable insights from many of our team members. We're going to talk about a number of issues that Congress is looking to tackle as it convenes for the second session, some of its own making, some deadline driven, and some based on events around the world. Our team is going to first give you an overview of what to expect time-wise over the course of this Congress. Then we're going to dive in a little bit into the House and the Senate, review some of the margins that the leadership in those chambers has to work with. We'll talk about some of the deadlines that are driving debates on Capitol Hill. Also look at Venezuela action over the weekend and talk about what that might mean for the agenda. We'll discuss some of the other priorities Congress wants to tackle, and then we'll turn to your questions, where we're sure you'll have good insights into what's happening this year, and our team will be providing more as we dive into that. And I'm Lauren Duggan. I'm joined by Liliana Byington and Maeve Sheehy, who are our eyes and ears in the Senate and the House, respectively, up all the time on Capitol Hill, talking to lawmakers, talking to staff, and getting useful information from them that feeds our stories, newsletters, and beyond. We're also joined by Danielle Parnas, who's the lead legislative analysis editor, who works with our legislative analysts producing BGov bill analysis, BGov on points, and other important and useful documents to help you understand what's going on in public policy. One of the recent publications that Danielle and her team worked on, and that includes information from across our newsroom, is the Hill Watch report that was released yesterday morning. Hopefully you had the chance to see it. If not, you can find it in the BGov exclusive section of our website, and we'll also be providing a link to that later today. We've included the cover slide, which is talking about all the things that are going on in Capitol Hill, and an example of one of the slides that's there, energy and environment, looking at some of the dynamics at play. We've used this presentation in the on point to power a lot of the discussion today. And why don't we go ahead and start getting into that discussion? And with that, I'm going to pull in Danielle to talk a little bit about what's going on with Congress over the course of the year in terms of its calendar. Danielle?
Thanks, Lauren. So here we have a calendar with the House and Senate voting days for 2026. One thing to note is that these days can change throughout the year, particularly in the Senate, where they tend to leave Washington a little earlier each week on Thursdays instead of Fridays. But for the most part, this is what we have to watch for the year. Another important thing to note about the calendar this year is that it's an election year, of course, with the midterms coming up in November. So both chambers will have a second month-long recess in October, in addition to the annual August recess. So that leaves about 31 weeks with the Senate in session this year and 29 weeks in the House. And all that comes with the backdrop of several big deadlines for action this year that Congress will need to address, all while they're looking ahead to their campaigns and also staring down a lame duck session at the end of the year. So if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at some of those important deadlines. We've highlighted a few of them here, and we're going to go into more detail on a handful of them in this webinar. But just to highlight a few, the first one on the list here is a deadline that already passed. That was the December 31st expiration of the enhanced healthcare subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. Congress is still working through that issue, and we will have more on that shortly. And then following that, the next imminent deadline is the January 30th expiration of the continuing resolution that has funded most of the government at temporary levels, while lawmakers are negotiating longer-term funding for the rest of fiscal 2026. Tied to that CR were several healthcare authorities that then expire January 31st, and those are typically considered alongside whatever government funding bill that they pass. We also have two special elections coming up, one in Texas and one in New Jersey, and we are also waiting to hear if there will be another special election as well to fill the seat of Doug LaMalfa of California, whose untimely death was just announced this morning. Jumping ahead to April 20th, that's another big congressional deadline, and will renew the debate around electronic surveillance authorities when the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, Section 702 in particular, expires. In July, we have the 6th anniversary of the USMCA trade agreement, and the countries involved in that will need to determine whether they want to renew it. And then September 30th is always a big date in Congress with the end of the fiscal year and many other programs that are also typically tied to that date. In this case, we have the highway bill expiring, which will be a major focus in Congress this year, as well as some remaining farm bill programs that were temporarily extended in the CR. Then November 3rd is the midterm election date. And the last day of the calendar year brings about deadlines related to the National Defense Authorization Act, the Export-Import Bank, and water resources projects through the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's a lot of dates. And again, we're going to dive deeper into a few of these issues. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it to Maeve to talk about the dynamics going into the year in the House.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, we have some dynamics in the House where we have the same leadership team we had in the year before, but a lot of new issues and older issues that are just going to keep popping up. You have Speaker Mike Johnson, who's faced a lot of issues with his kind of narrow GOP majority, and also Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who's been spending the past year and will definitely spend the next year trying to position himself to become Speaker if Democrats retake the House. Both leadership teams are going to be laser focused on midterm elections and essentially just trying to keep control of the House or flip the House. So that will be something to watch. And also in 2027, regardless of who is in charge of the House, it'll be interesting to see whether either of these leadership teams change. We have a very narrow majority, one of the narrower House majorities in history. It's actually 218-213 Republicans to Democrats as of today. Unfortunately, Doug LaMalfa has passed away. We also yesterday had Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation take effect. So we're seeing a lot of departures that are narrowing the margin. And Democrats will also pick up a seat at the end of the month, likely. It's a special election in Texas, so that would just further narrow these majorities. That's obviously very significant because it means Speaker Johnson can only lose 1 or 2 GOP votes on any party line bill and still get that passed. And we'll look at some more departures at the end of the Congress in the next slide. So we have a number of people who are running for Senate from the House. It's a very long list, as you can see. We also have a number of people who are either running for governor or, in Chip Roy's case, for attorney general. You always see a lot of people leaving the House to run for higher office. I mean, that's kind of just the way things go, but it is a specifically high number this year. And you also have a number of people who are just retiring. That includes former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who's obviously a figure who looms very large. You also have Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who was originally supposed to be in the Trump administration, has been a key Trump ally, but has fought with Johnson more in this year. And then 2 I really want to point out are 2 moderate House members, Jared Golden, a Democrat, and Don Bacon, a Republican. These are 2 of the most moderate and most bipartisan lawmakers in the House. And losing them means that, that will be an obstacle for bipartisan work, but it also means that there could be some younger bipartisan members who are able to raise their profiles. And now I will turn it over to Liliana, who will talk about the dynamics over in the Senate.
Thanks, Maeve. Yeah, the Senate's balance of power is unchanged from the first session of this Congress, where 53 Republicans hold the majority in the chamber, a little different from the House. But that number still makes it difficult for Republicans to pass most major legislation without the help of Democrats to get that 60 vote thresholds for the filibuster. Although President Trump has been pressing Senate Republicans to change the filibuster ahead of the midterms, which is something to watch this year too, Senate Republicans have resisted that, said the numbers aren't there to make the change, which means that 53-47 dynamic is there to stay for this session. And so, but the way to watch will be where legislation is the vehicles that they can add their priorities to, like Danielle mentioned with the appropriations bill this month. The key faces in the Senate to watch will also be the same that they were last year. We have Majority Leader John Thune looking this year to keep a hold over his caucus as he pushes to do more through regular order. On the Democrat side, you've seen a little bit more consternation over the past year, with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer facing a good amount of backlash for his calls over government funding, which has raised questions about the future of his leadership in future Congresses, but for right now, he is here to stay. One thing to watch this year for the coming year will be the jockeying around positions. Minority Whip Dick Durbin is retiring after this term, and Senator Brian Schatz has already locked in the support to take over that role in the next Congress. So a lot to watch when it comes to how the positions will be moving around when it comes to the next Congress, and you're going to see a lot of that jockeying this Congress and this year. You have Communications Chair Cory Booker and Policy Chair Amy Klobuchar both also looking at higher positions, but now we have Senator Klobuchar looking at a potential run for governor in Minnesota, so that could really change the dynamic there. But one of the things that we'll be looking at is the midterms, which is how this dynamic is going to change for the next year. And if we go to the next slide, you can see on this map a look at the states with senators up for re-election this cycle. So the 2026 Senate map is considered favorable to Republicans in this cycle. Democrats are defending 13 seats, Republicans 22. In order for Democrats to take the majority for the Senate in the midterms, they would need a net gain of 4 seats. And that's an uphill battle for them. They're defending some vulnerable seats there, like Georgia, Senator John Ossoff's seat. There's some other toss-up seats that they'll be defending, so it will be a challenge for them to get the majority. So it is considered favorable to Republicans, but there's a bunch of seats that are open. And so another key part of understanding this map is how many incumbents are not running for re-election in 2026. So if we jump into the next slide, we can see that there are a good amount of open races this year from senators opting to retire. You have on this list some senators who were more expected, Senator Durbin, Senator McConnell, both eyeing those retirement ages. But there are also some surprises this year, with Senator Tillis announcing he'd leave after tussling with President Trump over his tax bill last year. Another surprise just last month when Senator Cynthia Lummis announced that she didn't think she had the energy for another term. She's someone that's made herself a key voice for crypto legislation on the Hill. That'll be one of the key races to watch. There are a lot of top high-ranking members here. They're important to different industries going forward. So there'll be a lot of really key races and positions to fill in the next Congress. These departures have created some interesting and competitive primary races that'll be to watch in early this year, like in Michigan, where you have Representative Haley Stevens, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and a progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed, all bidding for a spot in what's become one of the most competitive Michigan Democratic Senate primaries since the 90s. And so we are also tracking this pattern of senators leaving for governor. And so you have several here that are opting to run for governor instead of opting for another term. You'll see that with both Senator Bennett, Marsha Blackburn running for governor, and also with Senator Tuberville. Tuberville is not doing another term. Instead, he's one of the only ones that's term ends. So there's an open election for his seat. But for both Bennett and Blackburn, they are not up for re-election this cycle. And that is the same when it comes to Senator Klobuchar, who is now weighing a governor run, but also isn't up for re-election this cycle. So these will all be pretty important and key races to watch in this year. And now if we shift gears a little bit to talk about what's happening in Congress this week and this month, the big news really this weekend and this week on Capitol Hill is Venezuela. One of the topics that senators and House members are talking about getting briefed on this week will be what happened over the weekend. The news over the weekend that the U.S. captured Maduro and his wife and that they're facing charges in New York really rocked Congress. Although there is this bipartisan disdain for Maduro, the way that this was handled and executed without Congress's knowledge and authorization has seen backlash from Democrats for sure. But there isn't too much that they can do when it comes to pushing back. But there are a few things. And so in the Senate, one of the things to watch this week will be that Senator Tim Kaine says he's going to bring up his war powers resolution on Venezuela. That's one of the ways that the minority can push back in the Senate. And it's not the first time they've done this. It has failed before, likely to happen again. But they're going to put people on the record after this action over the weekend. There are some Republicans expected to support it. Senator Rand Paul is a co-sponsor of the resolution. That vote is currently expected to happen on Thursday, so that's one thing to watch. Another way that Republicans and Democrats can push back is by putting measures on top of appropriations bills. And so that's something that they did with the defense authorization bill at the end of last year. And that's something that they could do with the appropriations package they're hoping to consider this month. And some Democrats are already pushing for an amendment to bar defense funds for military action in Venezuela without congressional authorization. Now, that is a difficult sell for Republicans, but it is something that Democrats will be pushing, at least for votes for, on the floor when it comes to amendments. And a lot of what you'll probably continue to see is we have these briefings. We had one last night in Congress. We'll have another one expected tomorrow for more members. And that will continue to happen as more of this military action takes place. There also could be some public hearings. There's been some interest from members on that. But for right now, the briefings have been classified and not for the public. And another way that they could do this is discharge petitions on the House side. That's also possible. And speaking of discharge petitions, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague Maeve to talk more about that and another topic that'll be really key this month.
Yeah, healthcare has been one of those issues that we've been hearing about for the past year very intently. It's a huge part of Democrats' platform. And it's also a huge issue that kind of divides House Republicans. So what we're going to see later today is likely House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries will call up a bill on healthcare that was discharged through the discharge petition that Liliana just mentioned, after 4 moderate Republicans crossed the aisle to sign on to it. And that is a 3-year clean extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits that expired at the end of last year. These have been a huge issue. It was a big part of the reason why Democrats wanted, or Democrats kind of forced the long government shutdown that we saw last year. And this 3-year extension is not what moderate Republicans initially wanted. But after Republican leadership would not put on a shorter extension or a more moderate bill, they kind of crossed the aisle and signed on to this. So it'll be interesting to see how that vote goes. It will likely be on Thursday, called up today, debated tomorrow, and then voted on Thursday. It'll be really interesting to see if those 4 moderate Republicans who signed on to the discharge petition kind of stay the course and still vote for it. However, that bill would face really tough odds in the Senate, where Senate Republican leadership, like House Republican leadership, does not like the whole 3-year long extension without any reforms or income caps, even though that is the Democratic position in the Senate as well. Senators are looking for a bipartisan compromise, though, to extend the tax credits with some changes. These would likely be something like fraud guardrails or income caps that would make it more palatable to some Republicans. The chamber rejected a 3-year extension in December, as well as a Republican bill that would fund HSAs. HSAs have been a really huge part of Republicans' argument for healthcare. And in the House, we also saw a healthcare bill right before the break that would have been more conservative, but would not have extended the ACA subsidies. Senate Majority Leader John Thune had said that the House extension could be a vehicle for a deal. So if the House does pass this 3-year extension on Thursday, it could be amended in the Senate and sent back to the House. And that's really something that's worth watching, because if there is some sort of deal, that would help revive those credits that expired at the end of December already. In terms of telehealth, some telehealth flexibilities under Medicare lapse on January 31st, along with community health center funding and a delay of Medicaid DSH cuts. We also will very likely see lawmakers renew efforts to rein in pharmacy benefit managers. This has been a huge topic over the past year, and especially before the Christmas break, we heard a lot about it. There was a bipartisan Senate bill to delink PBM payments from drug prices and prevent spread pricing in Medicaid, and that was introduced in December. So it'll be interesting to see if we see action on that. There were also several bipartisan House bills that would target similar provisions that are worth taking a look at. Anything bipartisan in this Congress on healthcare is really interesting to watch. And we also saw the House-passed GOP health bill that I referenced earlier, and that included provisions targeting PBMs, as well as some other more conservative healthcare proposals. But like I mentioned, it did not include the ACA extension, which was in the end what Democrats really wanted. And now that we've talked about health a little bit, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, who will talk about some of the other major policy issues coming up.
Thanks, Maeve. So January 30th is fast approaching, and there are some tentative plans taking shape to fund the rest of the government for fiscal 2026. But I want to emphasize that a lot of this is very tentative, potentially particularly around the second and third minibus, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So just to back up for a minute, as I'm sure everyone remembers, we had a record-long government shutdown last fall, and that ended in November with a minibus that provided full-year funding for 3 appropriations bills, as well as the continuing resolution for the rest of the federal agencies and programs through January 30th. The 3 bills in the minibus were Agriculture FDA, Legislative Branch, and Military Construction Veterans Affairs. So the programs covered by those bills are already set for the rest of this year. That leaves 9 appropriations bills to take care of by the end of the month. And keep in mind from the calendar that the House is supposed to be out of session the last week of January, so there's effectively 3 weeks left to finalize the action there. Just yesterday, appropriators released a new 3-bill minibus that they're planning to take up this week in the House, and that includes Commerce, Justice, Science, Interior, Environment, and Energy and Water. The Senate will likely take that up soon after the House should pass, and there are still some hurdles to enactment there, particularly in the Senate where there are a few objections to provisions in the bill, and they'll be working out amendment negotiations on that. But that one seems likely on track to go through. So that leaves 6 remaining bills, and these are the most tentative of the plans. But our colleagues have reported that they're considering a second package that would include financial services, homeland security, and national security State Department. That one's also called for state foreign ops. That would be followed by a third package that would most likely include the 2 biggest spending bills, labor, HHS education, and defense, as well as transportation and HUD. Again, those 2 are in flux, and they include some of the most difficult bills to negotiate, so a lot of this could change, including what's in which package and when they actually are released or voted on. But if all that went according to plan without any hiccups, then lawmakers would be on track to get fiscal 2026 funding wrapped up by the end of this month. That will then let appropriators turn their attention to fiscal 2027, which begins October 1st, and we will start this process all over again. So we can go to the next slide now to talk about the next the next deadline, April 20th, regarding electronic surveillance authorities. So the debate here around FISA is usually one related to national security versus privacy concerns, and it's an interesting one because it doesn't typically fall around your usual partisan lines. We've seen in the past coalitions of right-wing Republicans and Democrats are focused on civil liberties have kind of come together to try and impose more restrictions on these surveillance authorities. The main controversy is around this Section 702, which allows the intelligence community to search through Americans' data if it's been incidentally collected during a foreign surveillance operation without a warrant. And the warrant requirement is a big part of the debate. An effort to include one during the last reauthorization failed, and calls for a warrant requirement have already been revived for this next reauthorization, including from House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, who is a key player in the debate, which our colleague Roxana Tiron recently reported last week. There's another issue regarding FISA as well from the last reauthorization. They changed the definition of an electronic service provider, and the Biden administration at the time said it was a necessary update to account for new technologies, but opponents said it was too broad and warned it would force a wide range of companies to essentially spy for the government. So again, this tends to be a fairly contentious debate, and we will continue to watch as it unfolds. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass it back over to Liliana to talk about the highway bill.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, another big date to know this year is definitely September 30th. That's when the programs reauthorized in the Biden administration's infrastructure law is up. House Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman Sam Graves has said he wants a bill ready for action this spring. Senators have expressed similar hopes, but there are more committees involved on the Senate side when it comes to this legislation. As you can see in this graphic On the House side, you have House T&I and Ways and Means that have jurisdiction on different portions of the bill. While on the Senate side, you have EPW covering highways, you have banking covering transit, you also have the Commerce, Science, Transportation Committee and Finance all having a piece. And so that does create a lot of moving parts to the legislation to put it together. And this year, when it comes to the highway bill, Republicans are really looking at focusing on traditional infrastructure for cars over things like transit, biking, pedestrian projects, things that have been more of a priority for Democrats. But it will be a bipartisan process. And so that's something that both sides will be keeping in mind as they work to craft it. Another thing to watch for is EVs. It's definitely been a point of contention between the two parties. EV charging was a big part of the last highway bill, and so I expect that to be something to definitely watch going forward when it comes to crafting this legislation, what is in there on that. And that kind of brings us to the Highway Trust Fund. The solvency of the Highway Trust Fund is kind of a constant problem that's brought up in the highway bill, and so that'll be another thing that you'll hear a lot of talk of as they work to craft this. It's an issue that lawmakers want to solve. We saw an attempt at working on that during the tax debate for the last year when it comes to trying to do something around EV fees. That didn't pan out, but it will be worth watching those proposals when it comes to the highway bill, since this is really the bread and butter of where you'd see that. Another thing to watch when it comes to the debate around the surface transportation reauthorization is efforts to overhaul permitting projects. Permitting has definitely been a priority for people on both sides of the aisle. And so that's something that could be added and included in a big package like this. But we have seen the president's attacks on offshore wind projects and the administration going around Congress when it comes to things they've authorized. That could really imperil these talks. We already had senators at the end of last year telling us that they didn't expect that they could meet this September 30th deadline, previewing that already, which is pretty far in advance to be saying that you probably won't meet a deadline. So I would keep an eye on an extension. That's pretty common when it comes to the highway bills, is giving temporary extensions so that they can continue to negotiate. One of the deadlines that one senator mentioned was, okay, if we can't do it by September 30th, maybe we could do it by the end of the year. So September 30th is the deadline to watch. They'll have to do something by then, but it could be a kicking the can down the road kind of situation that we've seen with the highway bill in the past. But definitely a lot of key issues to watch when it comes to EVs, highways, transit funding, and pedestrian projects. But for another key date to watch, I'll be passing it back to my colleague, Danielle.
Yes, so by the end of the year, we will have another debate around reauthorizing the Export-Import Bank. This is a federal agency that finances U.S. exports, and it is another issue with some interesting bedfellows. Past critics around the bank when it was last reauthorized included, some of the most liberal and conservative wings of each party, essentially saying the bank provides corporate welfare, only benefits a few very large companies and can distort the market. On the other hand, the supporters, who are typically more pro-business, moderate within both parties, say it's necessary to help U.S. businesses compete with foreign exports that are backed by their own country's export credit agencies. The Trump administration supported the reauthorization last time around and has been making a big push around investments in energy and critical mineral projects lately, in particular after his pick to leave the bank was just confirmed in September. So that, again, will be another debate that's going to resurface at the end of the year. And there are a few other big issues on tap that we will highlight if you want to go to the next slide. And Maeve, I will pass back to you to kick it off with the Farm Bill.
In 2023, we were expecting a 2023 Farm Bill or hoping for one. And instead, what we've seen is kind of a piecemeal extension over time. So we saw the GOP reconciliation law extended a lot of key programs through the 2031 crop year, which some agriculture committee leaders saw as a big victory. Also, the November continuing resolution that reopened the government, that extended several remaining policies for 1 year. So it's something that they'll have to revisit for this coming year. In general, House Agriculture Committee leaders on the House and Senate side have hoped for a big 5-year piece of legislation, much like they passed in 2018. They've been looking for, an actual farm bill rather than a piecemeal extension. So it'll be interesting to see if there are some more hearings on that, markups in the coming year, and really just what lawmakers are saying. And I would also note that Congressman LaMalfa, who passed away earlier today, he was the subcommittee leader on House Agriculture for Forestry, which is also an element of the Farm Bill. So House Republicans will need to tap somebody else to be the point person on that issue. And it's unclear as of now who that will be, but it's going to be interesting to watch. Another issue that the House Agriculture Committee has jurisdiction over, as well as financial services in both chambers, is cryptocurrency. We've seen a lot of action on crypto this year, including a crypto week in the House in July, when the House passed a bipartisan market structure bill. Key Senate panels are also planning to hold markups of some other crypto market structure legislation this month, which will be worth watching. We've seen a lot of talk about crypto market structure, a lot of action in both chambers, but so far there is yet to be one bicameral product that everyone agrees on. Lawmakers are also looking at a framework for crypto tax exemptions, which would be worth watching for the industry. I think in general, since the Trump administration has painted itself as the most crypto-friendly administration ever, it'll be interesting to see not just what they do as an administration, but also how they work with Congress and what legislation they're able to enact, especially before midterm elections, when everyone will be so focused on political things at the time. And I'll turn it over to Danielle to talk a little bit more about the tech element.
Sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about advancing legislation to create a national framework for regulating artificial intelligence. There's no comprehensive legislation that's been introduced yet, but it's a big priority for the Trump administration and the tech industry. And they essentially want Congress to override, what they say is now a patchwork of state laws regulating the technology. Senator Ted Cruz, who leads the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, is rolling out a package of AI-related legislation. One of the big things there that he's looking to do is to rein in some of these state rules that have begun to regulate AI. On the House side, Congressman Jay Obernolte is leading an AI task force and also plans to release comprehensive legislation on AI, so that will be a big topic to watch this year. Lawmakers could revisit related issue, bipartisan legislation to codify limits on chip exports to China. There was an effort to include those provisions in the fiscal 2026 NDAA, but those provisions were stripped out before final passage. And then lastly, there's a bunch of efforts to bolster protections for kids online. It's been percolating for a while, but the House and Senate have taken fairly different approaches to the topic, particularly regarding how much tech companies should be held accountable for protecting kids. So there are still some hurdles there to reach consensus.